Hey, what's happening, friend? Big Dog Ethan here, coming at you from a recording on Radio Free Nashville. And this is none other than the unnatural state of affairs, where we talk about all the developments, or as many as we can get to, in our unnaturally capitalist dystopian society for about an hour, and then we bang our heads to an hour of punk and rap tunes. We've got a lot to discuss today. So I'll finish my overview with the fascist insanity coming out of the White House and the waves of protests that we are seeing against said fascist regime. Obviously I'm going to be a little bit rusty, so thank you for y'all's patience. Anyways, after kind of finish my analysis of that, we're going to talk about the opposition coming from the Democrats, or lack thereof, and what that means for our pseudo-democratic system as we know it. And spoiler alert, it is weak as fuck. Weak as fuck. To put it lightly, might I add. Now, for those listening live, I also upload the uncensored versions of all these segments to the Kennel on Substack, with a list of all the sources that I cite in here as well. If you want to be notified when those get uploaded, you can subscribe to the Kennel by visiting https://thekennel.substack.com. Again, that link is https://thekennel.substack.com. Or if you're cool with having another app on your phone, you can also download the Substack app, and you can just search for the Kennel on there to get notifications for any new posts that I make on there. That's it. Let's get on to our first segment. So, for those who missed last week's broadcast, I ended my show on a bit of a cliffhanger after raging at the discourse surrounding Elon Musk's Nazi salute, among other things, including RFK Jr.'s ridiculous, just his ridiculousness, honestly. Like, I think out of all the picks in Trump's cabinet so far, I think RFK Jr. takes he definitely takes the cake for being the most incompetent. I think Pete Hegseth, he's kind of a close second, and the only reason why I would say a close second is just because, I mean, he definitely has that lust for war that one would expect from a Republican administration. So, it's at least on brand, I guess, but, that doesn't necessarily mean he's much, he's any more competent than RFK Jr., especially with respect to the role in which the role that he was given. But anyways, frankly, it's all kind of like I don't know. It's kind of like being the tallest kid in kindergarten, being like the worst Trump cabinet pick. So, I mean, frankly, they're all just fucking horrible. So, anyways, I raged at a lot of things, but specifically after raging about Elon Musk's Nazi salute and the whole fake debate that was posed around that. Oh, is it a Roman salute? Is it a Nazi salute? Well, there are like minor differences that can be like anyways, I'm not even gonna get started on that fucking rant again. After I was rambling about that, I asked a pretty loaded question. If the U.S. electoral process has once again left us with incompetent leadership, to put it very lightly, such incompetent leadership that this time holds quite explicit fascist ambitions for how it wants to govern, where do we turn next? Well, I'll answer that question in the next segment, but first, we need to look at the material ways, or one of them at least, in which this Fourth Reich has already eroded civil liberties in the U.S. And of course, we have to begin by examining the warrantless detainments and deportations of illegal residents with no due process, and the natural response, namely these protests that have erupted across the country. We're going to take a look at one prominent example of the Trump regime's constitutional violations, namely the horrific story of Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia's, again, I guess I technically have to say, likely illegal detainment and deportation. Now, for some background on Garcia and his deportation, I'm going to turn to this April 18th article from NBC News. Quote, Kilmar Abrego Garcia was living in Maryland with his wife and 3 children when he was deported to El Salvador, thrusting his case into the center of a pivotal legal battle. The Trump administration has accused him of being a member of the Salvadoran MS-13 gang and used that in its justification for deporting him to his home country, despite a judge's order from 2019 barring him from being sent there, unquote. Now, what's their evidence for Garcia being in the MS-13 gang? Oh boy.
They're talking about this image Trump posted on social media. It's a photo created by the Trump administration to bolster their case that Abrego Garcia is a member of the notorious gang. The faded...
Now, for those who are only listening and somehow haven't seen this photo, yeah, y'all are missing out on the full scale of this insanity. So you got... I can't count today for some reason. You have these 4 designs that are tattooed onto Garcia's hand. You've got a cannabis leaf, a smiley face, cross, and a skull. And right above them, there are 4 clearly photoshopped letters. MS13. And when I say clearly, I mean that there is no evidence that they even tried to make them look like part of the tattoos. I mean, the most, and I probably shouldn't even be doing this, but I guess I'm just feeling super fucking kind today. The most kind, I don't know, interpretation is they think that for whatever reason, the marijuana like stands for the M, the S for the smile, but it just kind of falls apart whenever you get to the cross and the skull. Like one, I mean, I guess like there's the centerpiece of the cross that could make it a 1, but then like what the fuck does the skull have to do with it? It doesn't matter. I'm like putting way too much, I don't know, effort into interpreting something that clearly they did not put as much effort or time into even like trying to establish some kind of plausible case as to why they think he's, some fucking gang member. And, I mean, let's keep it real here. I think they damn well know he's not a gang member. They're just looking for any excuse to deport any immigrant that they want to deport. This was Trump's promise, right? Yeah. This was his promise. They even used like the most generic font that you would find in like Microsoft Word, and they don't even like fit the shape and positioning of Garcia's hand. It is the most obvious Photoshop job of all time, and it ain't even close. And moreover, though, Trump is saying that this is his fucking evidence to deport a legal immigrant without any sort of due fucking process. back to the NBC article. Quote, the father, who had lived in Maryland for 13 years, is now being held in a notorious mega prison. The administration has called his incarceration there a, quote, administrative error, unquote. His wife and attorney deny the accusations against him and have been fighting for his return. They say he is a loving father and husband. He has never been charged with or convicted of a crime in the United States, records show. Yeah, literally they have no fucking case for deporting this guy. And yet they seem to be doing it in the most brutal way possible, right? Like, it's one thing if you deport him. Like, that's just bad enough, like deporting someone with no due process. But this prison that they've deported him to, so it's called CCOT. It's short for the Terrorism Confinement Center in Spanish. And it's a new prison built within, like, I would say, maybe the last 5 years or so. But even though it's a new prison, it's got notoriously horrendous conditions. So horrendous, in fact, that the Human Rights Watch group, they made a statement on these conditions for the JGG versus Trump court case on March 20th. The prison was first announced for a capacity of 20,000 detainees. The Salvadoran government later doubled its reported capacity to 40,000. As Human Rights Watch explained to the UN Human Rights Committee in July 2024, the population size raises concerns that prison authorities will not be able to provide individualized treatment to detainees, thereby contravening the UN standard minimum rules for the treatment of prisoners. People held in CCOT, as well as in other prisons in El Salvador, are denied communications with their relatives and lawyers, and only appear before courts in online hearings, often in groups of several hundred detainees at the same time. The Salvadoran government has described people held in CCOT as quote-unquote terrorists, and has said that they, quote, will never leave, unquote. Human Rights Watch is not aware of any detainees who have been released from that prison. The government of El Salvador denies human rights groups access to its prisons and has only allowed journalists and social media influencers to visit CCOT under highly controlled circumstances. In videos produced during these visits, Salvadoran authorities are seen saying that prisoners only, quote, leave the cell for 30 minutes a day. 30 minutes. And that some are held in solitary confinement cells, which are completely dark. While CCOT is likely to have more modern technology and infrastructure than other prisons in El Salvador, I understand the mistreatment of detainees there to be in large part similar to what Human Rights Watch has documented in other prisons in El Salvador, including, and I'm probably going to butcher the pronouncement here, including Izalco, La Esperanza, Mariona, and Santa Ana prisons. This includes cases of torture, ill treatment, incommunicado detention, severe violations of due process, and inhumane conditions, such as lack of access to adequate health care and food, unquote. That's all to say, this is one example of where kidnapped legal immigrants can be shipped off to by the Trump regime. By the way, how many, again, legal immigrants have been sent to CCOT? According to a libertarian think tank, yes, a right-wing think tank, the Cato Institute, 50 plus Venezuelans imprisoned in El Salvador came to U.S. legally, never violated immigration law. I was about to say international law, but immigration law. Like, they never even committed the crimes that the Trump regime is accusing them of committing. So Garcia's incarceration, it is far, far from the only quote-unquote administrative error. And I've got a bridge to sell you if you think that's actually an honest answer coming from the fucking Trump regime. Now, I've got good news and I've got bad news, both of which come from a June 6th NPR article. The good news, Garcia's back, woot woot. The bad news, he, quote, has been returned to the United States to face criminal charges, according to an indictment announced Friday, unquote. Yes, suddenly, after never bringing any charges to this man for months, while allowing him to rot inside a foreign prison, after providing no credible evidence or reasoning for doing so, and after facing an onslaught of public outcry over the blatant contempt for due process and basic human rights, they draw up some BS charges to put a case together and put him back behind bars. Back to the NPR article. Quote, Bondi says Abrego Garcia will face trial in the U.S. on these charges and, if found guilty, will serve time in a U.S. prison before being deported back to El Salvador. Abrego Garcia's attorneys said they're going to keep fighting to get him a fair trial. Quote, now, after months of delay and secrecy, they're bringing him back, not to correct their error, but to prosecute him. This shows that they were playing games with the court all along, Abrego Garcia's lawyer, Simon Sandoval-Maschenberg, told NPR. Quote, due process means the chance to defend yourself before you're punished, not after. This is an abuse of power, not justice, unquote. Yeah, that lawyer is spitting some fucking facts right there. One thing I think I forgot to pull in here. If I have his title correct, I believe it was the district attorney, for this, I don't know, jurisdiction, I guess. I'm probably not using the right word there, but oh well. This guy's been in Tennessee, I want to say since 2015, and he was actually he has a great career. Well, yeah, I mean he has a pretty accomplished career. So he basically prosecuted this whole gang in Clarksville. I think it was one of his first things, but more prominently, he actually successfully prosecuted the Christmas, the 2020 Christmas Day bomber in Nashville. That guy, that district attorney, he resigned right after these charges dropped. Now, granted, he didn't make any comment as to why he was doing that. That might come out later. This is from an article in the Tennessean, so I'm sure y'all can probably find it with a click in the search bar. But yeah, they did have, that's right, they did have some anonymous sources who were saying, yeah, this was the reason why he left. So awesome. Trump regime scaring away our district attorneys. That is just wonderful. Just wonderful. But to reemphasize, yes, Garcia is facing these charges in a Tennessee federal court. In fact, his arraignment, it's happening tomorrow. Here, well, I mean, I'm recording this here, but whenever you're listening to this live on the airwaves, here in Nashville at 10 a.m. at the Fred D. Thompson Federal Building and Courthouse. Now, his arraignment is at 10. Naturally, there is a protest planned for tomorrow as well. That's going to be starting at 9 a.m. It's organized or endorsed by a variety of local organizations. You have the United Volunteers and Organizers of Tennessee, the Tennessee Coalition for Democracy, Third Act Tennessee, Indivisible Tennessee, District 7, Nashville Party for Socialism and Labor, and it's also been shared by the Williamson County Democrats and the Tennessee State Democratic Party on their Instagram account. I would guess that at least constitutes an endorsement. Again, if I haven't mentioned it already, the protest is going to be taking place right outside that courthouse. The address is 719 Church Street, and it is happening tomorrow, starting 9 a.m., and it's going to be ending at 11:30 a.m. All of this information, including a registration link, including a registration link, can be found on the United Volunteers and Organizers of Tennessee website at https://uvotn.org/HQ/JUN13/. So I'm not going to read that for you. You could probably just find that by typing in United Volunteers and Organizers of Tennessee, or you can just look up, like I said, the Tennessee Democratic Party's Instagram account. Now, fair warning, as you probably could already tell, a good number of these organizations, they are liberal, lib type organizations, right? So they are not looking to, set Waymos on fire. I mean, even though I don't think Nashville has any of those, they're not looking to, riot in the streets and all that. And matter of fact, it was only a few hours after I signed up through the registration link, I get an email from one of the organizers saying, "Just a reminder, this is a peaceful protest. Please, God, don't do anything violent. Please, we want to keep this peaceful. We want to keep this legal, even though, that's probably not going to matter to the fucking Gestapo thugs who are going to come there to, intimidate protesters and crack down on the First Amendment. But please, God, please, don't let anyone be violent. Please." I'm probably overdoing it there, but you get the point. They really don't want, anything more disruptive than your typical protest, right? Now, don't get me wrong, given the stakes of what's happening, I'm certainly not going to be the one to come on here and tell you to, I'm not going to be the one to come on here and tell you to lick the Gestapo's boots, but, I did just want to note you're probably not going to have much institutional support if you're coming there to throw a brick into a cop car. So, you can do with that information, what you want to do with it. Okay? Now, obviously, I'm not a fan of all these organizations involved. I'll have plenty to say about the Democratic orgs involved in the next segment, or at least the Democrats at large. Yeah, actually, I don't have anything to say about the Tennessee Democratic Party. I saved my wrath for them for a later segment, sometime down the road. But yeah, even though I'm not a huge fan of all these organizations, this is something that truly merits the fullest community support that can be mustered in Nashville. This is something that anyone, well, for one, who can attend and who respects basic civil rights will show up to support. The protests in LA show exactly why all of us should be concerned. Now, I'm sure you've heard a lot about riots, chaos, anarchy in the streets in LA from, corporate propaganda outlets. We're going to do our best to ascertain the facts, again, as best as we can here, but especially with protests of this caliber, there is a fog of war that can kind of muddy the details. I definitely remember this. I grew up in St. Louis. I was 14 years old whenever the Michael. Shame on me. I think his name was Michael King. I'm pretty sure his name was. I gotta fact check myself now. I gotta fact check. glad I fact-checked myself. Michael Brown, shame on me. I should remember that guy's name. It's always important to remember the names of those who were slain by the fucking pigs. Anyways, yeah, there's a lot of fog of war, so I want to do my best to kind of try to pick through it, but frankly, the three outlets, or the three reports from three different outlets that I picked, they all say different things. So first off, this report, or like this, I mean report, but more of like an overview from the BBC that was published yesterday. This one is probably the most questionable out of all of them. Quote, hundreds of people have been arrested in Los Angeles after days of protests, which erupted following immigration raids ordered by U.S. President Donald Trump. An overnight curfew is in force after violence in downtown L.A. Elsewhere, much of the protest activity has been peaceful. Demos have also been confined to relatively small pockets of LA, while also spreading to other U.S. cities. Trump has deployed thousands of troops, including 700 U.S. Marines to LA, triggering a row with state officials who say they have things under control. It's a very British thing to say that you're having a row. Literally, I literally saw, whenever I woke up this morning, I saw like Gavin Newsom, like, he just tweeted like a picture of the California flag. I mean, this dude, like, he's doing what he can, I guess, to resist Trump, but he's also doing the most that he can do without really, like, I don't know, without really rocking the boat, because obviously, you know, it's a lot more, well, there are also benefits to, you know, staying in the administration's good graces, I suppose, for Newsom himself, but that's a whole different story. So anyways, yeah, Trump has decided to deploy thousands of troops, but back to the BBC article. Quote, why are people protesting in LA? The demonstrations began on Friday after it emerged Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, officers were carrying out raids in areas of the city with prominent Latino populations. Raids have been stepped up after Trump returned to the White House and pledged to crack down on illegal immigration. The BBC's U.S. partner, CBS News, reported that recent operations took place in the Westlake District as well as in Paramount, south of LA, where the population is more than 82% Hispanic. There were also reports of an ICE raid at a Home Depot shop in Paramount, which officials told the BBC were false. ICE later told CBS that 44 unauthorized immigrants were arrested in a single operation at a job site on Friday. Another 77 were also arrested in the greater LA area on the same day. So, even this overview effectively takes the regime's claims at face value. I mean, literally they're just saying, well, officials said the raid didn't happen at a Home Depot, and then cites nothing else to give further details. Now, the LA Times is also saying that there wasn't a raid at this Home Depot, quote, but dozens of Border Patrol agents and other federal agencies were inside a gated industrial office park where an initial crowd had gathered, unquote. And instead of just saying, well, the regime said it didn't happen, so I guess it didn't happen, the article also provides adequate context as to what motivated the protest, noting in detail how a local elected official saw some sketchy customs and Border Patrol vehicles driving around the area. He made a few Instagram posts about it and then ended up garnering a spontaneous protest that formed outside of this industrial park. The assemblyman, by the way, wasn't doing this for just shits and giggles. This is from the article 2. Quote, the day before, federal officials raided a retail and distribution warehouse in the Fashion District downtown, a business district fueled by immigrants, and arrested a top union official. Leading up to the workplace raid, federal agents arrested immigrants as they came to scheduled check-ins or made courthouse appearances up and down the state, tearing apart families. One father was arrested in front of his 8-year-old son. Parent groups raised alarms after a Torrance Elementary student and his father were set for deportation. So, unlike the lazy BBC reporter, the LA Times journalists made it clear that these protesters weren't just stirred up by some punks. Like, these are immigrants who have valid grievances with the Trump Gestapo. But even still, it's where things still get even more confusing. The Bezos Post, the Washington Post, gives such a vivid description of the Home Depot raid that kind of demonstrates it actually happened. Quote, Angel knew from the moment he raised his hand with a whistle and shouted, "Labor!" at a white van pulling into the Home Depot parking lot full of workers last Friday that something felt wrong. The Honduran immigrant caught a glimpse of the driver and a passenger wearing what looked like bulletproof vests. He followed the vehicle with his eyes as it parked toward the eastern entrance near downtown Los Angeles and the heart of the city's Central American immigrant community. His creeping suspicion exploded into full-blown fear just as the doors of the van opened and masked agents began pouring out. La migra! Angel and another day laborer yelled. More than 100 men and women standing in the parking lot began to run. 6 migrants who said they were present recounted how federal immigration authorities began handcuffing anyone they could grab in one of several raids in the city that would spark a wave of unrest and leave immigrant workers of all stripes jolted. Yeah, we don't really have a clear story, and, well, I'll tell you this, whatever clean story we get from mainstream outlets could still have some factual errors, but it's pretty clear from all these accounts that the source of the protest, at the very least, is not cynical actors paid off by foreign adversaries or rebels without a cause simply looking to create mayhem and chaos within our orderly society. No, this is a community whose members' civil rights have fundamentally and traumatically been violated by the federal government, and they have very little recourse or protection from their local and state governments to turn to. Now, Ken Klippenstein's reporting, as always, he just breaks through this mainstream news narrative of, this is just wild chaos in the streets. This is from a June 9th article on Ken Klippenstein's Substack. Okay. I can kind of talk. Quote, there's no question the protests are about ICE roundups and deportations, but not one interview I've found is from a person who said that they were in America illegally, which is kind of self-evident. Why would such a person risk deportation by attending a protest anyway? The more interviews I watched, the more I began to realize that people are just as upset by the imposition of the national security state into daily life as they are about people being deported. Quote, I don't know why we're living in a police state, a young man complained. Everyone's affected by this, unquote. Quote, you go after criminals, man, the real criminals, not the innocent, hard-working people, man, another man said. No criminals at Home Depot, he added, referring to ICE visits to round up brown people looking for work. Quote, the fact that there's still missing kids being sex trafficked, human trafficking, but yet they'll give the same energy to these immigrants, a young woman complained. These are all Americans. President Trump, in his first month in office, issued an executive order labeling illegal immigration a, quote, invasion, unquote, thus national security-izing the issue. Trump has condemned the anti-ICE protests in Los Angeles as, quote-unquote, migrant riots, with White House officials saying the presence of Mexican flags shows the demonstrations are by foreigners illegally in the United States. There's just one problem. It's bullshit, as the interviews demonstrate. One of the Mexican flag wavers was interviewed by the New York Times and said that she was both an American and happy to be one. Quote, I am a very proud American, said 36-year-old Elizabeth Torres, who explained that her grandparents immigrated to the United States. Quote, but I have to show support also for our Mexican brothers and sisters, unquote. The ethnic component of this spectacle is unmistakable in a city like Los Angeles, where roughly half of its population are Hispanics. Speaking out is dismissed by their own government as the disloyal words of an illegal, unquote. Is it any surprise that people are pissed off? Try to imagine the hysterical backlash against the Mexican flags happening to, say, the people who've protested with Ukrainian flags. Yeah, it would never happen. Quote, they're Hispanic, a young woman said of the people being deported. Quote, they're all Hispanic, unquote. Now, the National Guard and the military have been added to the combustible mixture, all predicated on the supposed national security threat. While Trump and company scream, foreign invasion, the opposition cry, fascism, unquote. Lost in all of this is what the protest is actually about, unquote. So it definitely makes sense that our good boy, Mr. Klippenstein here, finds that takeaway about people feeling fed up with our national security state, feeling constantly surveilled by a government that increasingly seems to give less of a shit about them. I get how he finds that, but the thing is too, there's also an additional thing that I would say that these protests really deal with too, and that is organized labor and the rights of organized labor. Considering that a locally well-known president of a labor union in LA, President David Huerta of the Service Employees International Union of California, considering that he was arrested at one of these protests last Friday, we're now seeing these ICE raids being used to crack down on organized labor. And the thing is, I forgot to pull up the damn tweet, but even the fucking AFL-CIO called on its members to protest over that. For those who aren't terribly familiar with, organized labor, the AFL-CIO, they are one of the least militant unions out there. So they are calling for people to get out in the fucking streets. So it's a lot of fucking issues that's really motivating these protests. Now, a little more on Huerta's arrest last Friday. This is according to Cal Matters. It's a nonprofit outlet in California. Huerta was charged with, quote, impeding a federal agent, which comes with a prison sentence of up to 6 years, unquote. Now, he was thankfully released on bond, but Naturally, this sends a chilling message, especially since footage of his arrest indicates that he was definitely not impeding a federal officer. And I'll play that for those who are watching the video version on the Kennel.
U.S. Attorney Bill Asaley actually released this video himself, and you will see David Huerta in the video here. He's right there in front of the van in the red checkered shirt. You see the agent come up to him, the agent pushes him, and then takes him to the ground. You'll see it one more time. I slowed the video down for you. There he is. The agent walks up to him. It looks like he says something to him, and then you see the agent put his hands on him, and it appears that Mr. Huerta tries to hold his ground there, or footing, and then the agents come in, they take him to the ground, and put him in custody. Now, this was SkyCal video from...
So I gotta say that host did our audio-only listeners quite the favor. I think he described it in very good detail. It is very clear this officer came up and boom, just like put his hands on him. Now, obviously, all alleged, of course. For anyone who wants to be, fact check stickler or whatever the fuck, but I mentioned that, and I show you this clip to emphasize that, yeah, these are primarily instigated by the unlawful detainments and deportations of immigrants with, again, no due process, but there is a larger anger that is fueling this unrest. It's an anger at a dystopian security state that penetrates everyone's daily lives, made only worse with stagnating wages, a record level of wealth inequality that expands by the minute, and seemingly no hope for any solutions to these problems. If you're someone who's moved heaven and earth to flee to the U.S. for a better life or just for your own safety, yet you're struggling to make ends meet, despite working your ass off to put food on the table for your family by working various contractor gigs that pay shit, and then you start seeing your neighbors, friends, or relatives get effectively kidnapped by masked Gestapo agents in unmarked vehicles, all of that in what you dream to be the land of the free or whatever the fuck, while fleeing poverty or an authoritarian regime from your homeland. Whenever you're saying all that, what else can you and can your community members do but rise up and defend yourselves? Yeah, there's property damage. Sure, there's violence. Here's the thing, though. The majority of it is not being done by individual actors in these massive protests, though. The majority is being committed and has been being committed by these ICE and CBP thugs who are coming into our communities and violently tearing neighborhoods, communities, families apart. And with the National Guard, oh, right, and the fucking Marines being deployed, the Trump regime is only going to commit more of the violence that, one, it claims that it wants to end, but two, was the one who fucking started it whenever, again, they started doing these fucking illegal detainments and deportations with no fucking due process. And even though this is all happening thousands of miles away from us, we cannot forget that our own community has had to deal with this fucking Gestapo bullshit. For those who didn't have friends posting updates on Instagram about ICE detainment sightings, the Nashville Banner, they published a good summary on the raids a few weeks ago. Gotta find that. Here we go. Title, quote, "Less than half of nearly 200 arrested in Nashville ICE operation had criminal history." Quote, "The Federal Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, agency on Tuesday," which would have been May 13th, on Tuesday, May 13th, trumpeted the results of the recent operation that incited outrage, panic, and confusion around Nashville. The agency, which worked alongside the Tennessee Highway Patrol to stop and question upwards of 500 drivers the previous week, revealed the most information to date about the operation, but left many unanswered questions about how it was carried out and who was swept up in it. Reports of continued ICE activity have also surfaced this week. And again, this was published on May 14th. Well, ICE had already been taking increased numbers of undocumented immigrants into custody from the Nashville jail. An escalation came overnight, Saturday, May 3rd, into the next morning, when Tennessee Highway Patrol troopers stopped around 150 drivers over the course of several hours, handing over dozens to ICE agents waiting nearby. ICE activity continued through last weekend as Metro officials and Nashville residents expressed heartbreak and alarm about the detentions. On Tuesday, releases from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and ICE claimed the Nashville operation led to the arrest of 196 undocumented immigrants, less than half of whom had prior criminal convictions or pending criminal charges. The agencies also said that 31 of the individuals who were detained had been previously removed from the country and committed a felony by re-entering illegally. The ICE release cited 7, quote-unquote, notable arrests, including 2 alleged gang members, if we take the hint from the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case, that's probably bullshit, quote, and others with prior convictions for serious crimes. The DHS release falsely stated that the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee's Belonging Fund will, quote, provide taxpayer dollars for aliens in Nashville, unquote. And a statement from Assistant DHS Secretary Tricia McLaughlin singled out Nashville Mayor Freddie O'Connell. God, imagine thinking fucking Mayor O'Connell is really your fucking worst enemy. Jesus Christ, these people don't know their head from their fucking ass. And by the way, that's not like a total defense of Mayor O'Connell. We'll get to him in a sec. It's just this this guy's gonna be the least of your fucking problems. You keep doing this shit. Anyways, quote, you would think all public officials would unite around DHS, bringing violent, criminal, illegal aliens to justice and removing them from American communities. However, pro-open border politicians like Mayor O'Connell would rather protect illegal aliens than American citizens, McLaughlin said, making her instinctual Heil Hitler salutes. But moreover, I always love these kind of statements from like Republican dipshit hacks like this McLaughlin idiot who you know, like tries to like make one of their opponents like look bad with like one of their statements to the press, but for one just ends up sounding kind of fucking crazy and makes like baseless accusations, and then at the same time also kind of makes their opponent like kind of sound a lot more badass than they actually are. Because like here's the deal, I fucking wish Mayor O'Connell was like pro open borders or whatever the fuck. I I wish this guy was doing literally anything to actually stop this fucking Gestapo from coming in, tearing families apart, and making everyone scared and worried for their immigrant neighbors. Because here's the thing, my friends. According to an AP article, literally all that O'Connell is doing, he is demanding more transparency from the Tennessee Highway Patrol and ICE to identify who was arrested and what for, and he's also shortening deadlines for, quote, city agencies to report communications with federal immigration authorities to the mayor's office, unquote. Yeah, I wish he was just telling the Gestapo to fuck off, go to hell, and I just wish he was unleashing the local police on their asses. But he's literally just doing the most tepid response that a typical metropolitan U.S. mayor would do. I mean, here's the deal, y'all. Like, Nashville needs a way better response to the unleashing of this Gestapo on our immigrant working class neighbors. And I really don't care what Fox News tells you and what kind of lies that they spin your way. LA is a damn good example of what we need. And while I don't think the appetite for that scale of resistance can be found here in the buckle of the good old Bible Belt, I think that a peaceful protest in Nashville is a good step towards building that cultural consent. So, yeah, that said, I'll see you at the Fred T. Thompson Federal Building and Courthouse tomorrow, 9 a.m. sharp. You know, I always love it whenever, after doing like a really long segment, and I turn over to my monitor and I see my camera is out of focus. So apologies if you had to stare at a blurry image of me flailing about for too long. But anyways, there's a lot more important things to discuss, obviously, than my tech woes, because we got to talk about the very lacking opposition that we're seeing from the Democratic Party. And when I say very lacking opposition, I mean incredibly incompetent, stupid, lazy, hollow. There are just not enough words to describe how horrendous it has been. Now, don't get me wrong. Yes, there have been a few highlights. Tim Walz, I think now that he's off the Kamala Harris campaign, he's been he's had a few like good viral clips that have kind of popped up in my social media feed, or feeds plural. Then you've also got the anti-oligarchy tours. I kind of worried that, yeah, I don't know how effective those are actually going to be, but they've definitely drawn some pretty fucking big crowds. So that, you know, that is nice to see that, you know, Bernie Sanders at least is still getting out there, even though he knows damn well he's not going to be able to run for president at his age now. But there have been little bits of good stuff coming from them. Oh yeah, of course there was the whole Cory Booker speech. Doesn't really make me change my opinion of him, because that dude is a fucking genocidal fascist who I don't know the exact amount, obviously, because I'm just kind of talking down my ass here, but I do know he has been swimming in those pro-Israel advocacy group or lobbying group donations. So anyways, the Democratic Party, it's just consistently gotten worse. Oh, and then also the fucking gerontocracy shit, where you have like Jerry Connolly, this 70-year-old dude who already had stage 4 esophageal cancer, getting put in the House Oversight Committee, which is really like one of the best instruments of power for the minority party in the House of Representatives. They put this old geezer that no one has fucking heard of before over AOC. And don't get me wrong, obviously I got my issues with AOC. I think over time she's also not largely, but a lot more than initially expected. She's kind of capitulated to the big wigs of the Democratic Party, right? But I mean, she would have been a hell of a lot better leader of that committee in just holding the majority party, the Republican Party, to account. And so we got this 70-year-old geriatric idiot, again, with stage 4 esophageal cancer, which I don't think I mentioned this part yet for those who don't know. That's basically like that's a sign you're going to die pretty soon. And what do you know? The old fucker croaked. I don't think there's anything more disgraceful than just overstaying like your welcome in Congress when you know damn well, you're not going to make it through to the next term, or at least be very unlikely. And even if you do make it to the next term, you're going to be hobbling along through. Well, everyone voices their complaints about the fact that this nation is led by a bunch of geriatric idiots whose brains are like stuck in fucking 1985. It's insane. So that whole ramble is just to emphasize it has been a horrendous performance from the Democratic Party so far. But I gotta say, I think the peak example of incompetence, of political malpractice, I guess, it's this whole drama that I guess is recently concluded with the leadership of the DNC. It had a bit of a sad conclusion too, unfortunately. And yeah, as always on this show, this will also lead into a broader issue about the health, I would say, of our already pretty weak so-called democracy. So for those who haven't been keeping up, the Democratic National Committee, they re-elect a new board of officers after every election cycle. And obviously, the Democrats needed a serious course correction after losing so spectacularly in what should have been a layup of an election. Their opponent was Donald Trump, who, like, right before the election was doing these stupid things like talking about Arnold Palmer's dick at a fucking rally. Like, look, it's one thing if you can kind of like weave that in there and make like kind of a funny joke. That's one thing, but like just kind of came out of nowhere. And at least from my memory of it, the crowd just kind of gave an awkward chuckle as a, oh, this guy's fucking losing it. Are we seriously going to be voting for this idiot? He's just as mentally gone as Biden. Do we really want to do this? Someone please kill me. But no, I mean, for real, like, this should have been a layup of an election, and Kamala Harris just fucking fumbled the bag. Well, for the most part, there's a bit of an asterisk over everything, which I'll touch on that towards the end of all this. But yeah, no, I mean, they just flat out failed. And what's worse is this new board of officers that they were going to elect, or this new board of officers that they did elect, not really very inspiring. So the chair that they picked was Ken Martin. I believe he's had like, I think at one point he was vice chair of the DNC, and then before that he held like a lot of leadership positions within the Minnesota State Democratic Party, which, I mean, I will say, like, that alone, not a bad record. But what really turned me off on him, whenever it's kind of like keeping up with the DNC elections, is this comment that he made at one of their candidate forums. Now, one thing to keep in mind too, by the way, there were other candidates who were absolutely running on a more like reformist kind of agenda. You had Marianne Williamson. Going to keep it real with you. She kind of devastated me. For those who don't know, I was rooting for her in the 2024 Democratic presidential primary. And, yeah, she tried running for the chair position, which honestly at face value just really didn't make a lot of sense because obviously she was morally right, morally correct, and she was proven right on this to challenge Biden, in a primary election. Obviously that didn't really gain her a lot of like friends. especially within the DNC and obviously the DNC election, that those votes are kind of reserved for like the most dedicated members, right? The most loyal blue dogs, right? So she decides to run for chair, and unsurprisingly doesn't get the votes that she needs. And then right before, I believe it was like right before this guy ended up getting elected, Ken Martin, she ends up endorsing him. And if I'm not mistaken, this was after he made this comment that I'm about to show you. So this is from this brilliant new leader of the DNC, Ken
There
Martin.
are a lot of good billionaires out there that have been with Democrats who share our values, and we will take their money, but we're not taking money from those bad billionaires.
Here, thank you, Joe Martin.
There are a lot of good.
This guy, after seeing an election, after seeing a lot of people respond so negatively, so either negatively or apathetically to Biden and then Kamala's run for the presidency, they made it very clear, like, the days after the election, we need to do some rethinking. We have to take a hard look in the mirror, figure out where we went wrong. I don't even think this guy fucking looked in the mirror for like a fucking millisecond. Y'all, the core issue with the Democratic Party, the core issue with it ever since the fucking 90s, whenever Bill Clinton, came in with all this fucking corporate donor support, the whole problem has been the influence of special wealthy interests within the party. That's been their whole fucking problem for like the past 30 years. I mean, they've had a lot of issues, but if I had to name just one, it's definitely that, right? And this guy is coming up here on stage, not only saying, oh yeah, we're going to be, we're not going to be changing that one bit. No, he's even going so far. He is going so far to suggest that there is a good thing, to suggest that there is such a thing as a good billionaire. For those who aren't aware, to amass that kind of wealth, absolutely requires, one, massive exploitation of so many workers. But on top of that, too, yeah, it's definitely going to require some tax evasion. I'll direct you to an article from ProPublica. They were leaked a lot of IRS documents that basically showed that like billionaires like Warren Buffett, I think Warren Buffett was the top of that. He was paying he was basically paying an effective tax rate of 0.1%. 0.1%. And then I think like second or third was like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. And I honestly forget the name of the fourth dude that they had shown on there. But anyways, point being is, there is no such thing as a good billionaire. And anyone with a basic understanding of the desires and like the needs of the base, like the actual base of like Democratic Party voters, they don't want this billionaire shit, dog. They don't want this billionaire shit. But of course he's going up there because obviously he only needs to get the votes of these DNC elites who are just as out of touch as he is. They're just in their own little fucking bubble. God forbid they actually do anything to reach out to their base and to actually give them something that they can get excited for other than, hey, our candidate isn't Trump. Our candidate isn't Republican. Please vote. Please. Please just vote. I gotta satisfy my corporate donors. So please vote for me. Like, No. So anyways, as soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, well, that's not good. Looks like they really did not take that long look in the mirror that they repeatedly talked about for like the first couple of weeks after the election. But there was one glimmer of hope. Just one glimmer. And that was the election of David Hogg as vice chair of the DNC, or one of the vice chairs. Now, here's the deal. Personally, I'm pretty neutral towards him, like just as a political figure. I don't feel terribly strongly about him, but I can't deny that he does have a moving personal story about his experience as a survivor of the Parkland school shooting. And what I most certainly appreciated about his campaign for the DNC vice chair position, however, was that he was very firm in his willingness to try to reform this party. I mean, he was very firm in that promise that he was actually going to do something to make this party a little more responsive to young voters. And he would know something about that because he's also a Gen Z voter, right? And he was starting to follow through on that promise because, so he gets elected in February, and by mid-April, he publicly threatened to fund Democratic primary candidates running against patently incompetent incumbents. Like, out of all the dipshit hacks that were elected to that board, he was the only one who knew one of the key reasons why the Democrats lost in 2024, because they refused to engage with the other presidential primary candidates who knew that voters were not satisfied with Biden and wanted other options. And this is his way of saying, you know, not only are we going to embrace democracy, embrace the primary election process, but if you're just doing a shitty job as a representative in Congress, guess what we're going to do? We're going to fund an opponent to primary your ass because we ain't got time for your shit. And you know what? Fucking based. I love it. Let's bring some life back into this party, right? But unfortunately, it's almost a law of nature at this point that whenever someone with just a bit of power in the Democratic Party proposes this change that would help improve their popularity, the old guard of status quo defenders rushes to block that change. This is from Politico on April 23rd. I gotta take a sip of my Monster. This is from Politico on April 23rd. Quote, the Democratic National Committee is going to force David Hogg to decide, get out of the primary game or lose his DNC post. During a member call on Thursday, DNC Chair Ken Martin is expected to announce a proposal to change the party's rules to mandate all DNC officers stay neutral in all Democratic primaries, according to a person directly familiar with the plan and granted anonymity to describe private discussions. The move comes after Hogg pledged last week to spend millions of dollars funding challenges to, quote, asleep at the wheel Democrats in primaries, igniting a firestorm inside the DNC. The proposal, if passed at the DNC's August meeting, would effectively force Hogg to decide whether to step away from his DNC vice chair position or wall himself off from the group he co-founded, Leaders We Deserve, which is pledged to spend $20 million on challenging Democratic incumbents in safe blue seats. It's an escalation in the fight between Hogg and other DNC leaders and House Democrats, many of whom were enraged by Hogg's announcement. Side note, that's because they fucking know they're next. They're on the, I'll bet you all of those House Democrats, they knew, oh fuck, he's coming after me because I damn well know I have not done a fucking thing for my constituents. So, of course, naturally, they just start whining and start acting entitled to their fucking seat of power. Jesus fucking Christ. You know, just a side note, Republicans... Just a side note, the Republican Party, like, hands down, yeah, they're objectively worse. Like, I mean, they've literally just, I mean, if they weren't already fascist, they're definitely fascist now. But, man, like, the more that I just, like, read about the incompetency from the Democratic Party, part of me just hates them just as much. It's like, y'all are obviously aware about the threats that everyone is facing. And you are so blinded and corrupted by power and by wealth that you just can't have the fucking humility to say, yeah, you know what? I've been doing a good job, and obviously, like, a lot of our, obviously we need to do something to bring back a lot of our younger voters, because we definitely lost a lot of them in that last election, so, all right, Chief, yeah, I'm gonna step down. Like, no, these people are so fucking hungry for power. God. It's so hard, because obviously I get it, like, policy-wise, yes, they are... to an extent, depending on the congressperson, yeah, like, they're better than Republicans, but, like, Jesus Christ, like, it's just fucking elitist entitlement, and I wish nothing but the worst for all of those fucking people who acted so outraged at the notion that, hey, you're not doing your job very well, so maybe you should get the fuck out. Quote, Hogg, should probably highlight that. Quote, Hogg, who rose to national prominence as a gun safety activist after he survived a school shooting in Parkland, Florida, said last week that he planned to back candidates who would challenge, quote unquote, ineffective safe seat Democrats. But House members and Democratic leaders vented that he was touching off a, quote, circular firing squad, unquote, inside the party, unquote. To fully appreciate the irony of this proposal that Mr. Martin is wanting to pass, I want to share this clip of a CNN interview with Democratic House Representative Adam Smith that I shared in my reaction to the election results on MTSU's student radio station last November. Now,
another point. Yeah.
Oh, whoopsies. In this interview, he's giving his explanation for why he decided to be one of the first congressional Democratic legislators to call on Biden to step down after that horrendous debate. Which, by the way, weird to think. We're almost coming up on the year anniversary of that. Oof. Anyways, so Adam Smith, he learned a little lesson from the 2020 election that Democrats seemingly have yet to learn from.
The president talked today about how now it's all the elites who are trying to force him out.
Right.
Let's remember what happened in 2020. Okay, the president did not run a great primary campaign. He lost badly in Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada. He came out of Nevada, and Bernie Sanders looked like the presumptive nominee. And this exact same group of people,
the elites,
that the president is now deriding as elites. And by the way, they're not. They're Democrats, okay? They're party operatives, they're donors, they're volunteers, decided, and to all the Bernie supporters out there, I'm not judging this positively or negatively, they decided they didn't want Bernie Sanders to be the nominee. They decided that Joe Biden would be the better nominee. And credit, again, to the president. He decided that because he did 8 years as vice president. He did the years in the Senate. He had the record to be a strong president. And so they, through their support behind Joe Biden, and Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren and Mike Bloomberg and Amy Klobuchar, and I may be forgetting a few others, stepped aside for the candidate who was better. This myth that somehow Joe Biden came in and rescued us, it has been a nationwide movement since Donald Trump was elected president. And in 2020, that nationwide movement said, Joe, you're the best guy, let's go. Right now, they don't think he is.
So what happens then in the...
God bless that incredibly diplomatic way of saying that DNC elites, I know you don't want to use that term, but let's be honest here, that DNC elites colluded to give Biden an electoral bump on Super Tuesday and screw over Bernie Sanders. Now, some more naive folks could have said at the time this Political article came out, but big dog, this is them wanting to reform. They're going to pass an official rule that forces party leaders from staying neutral in primary elections. Isn't that like what you didn't like about what the DNC did in 2020? Okay, number one. So the issue in 2020, it wasn't necessarily party leaders involving themselves in a primary election. The issue was them doing so in direct contradiction of the will of the average voter, who at the time was overwhelmingly expressing in numerous polls that Bernie Sanders was their guy. As Ryan Grimm explains in his book, The Squad, AOC in the Hope of a Political Revolution, quote, Biden fairly easily carried Alabama, Arkansas, North Carolina, Tennessee, sadly, Virginia, and, to a lesser degree, Oklahoma. But he won Texas by fewer than 5 points, and Sanders had been polling ahead there since before Nevada. Sanders won easily in California, Colorado, Utah, and Vermont. Biden won by just 1 point in Maine. Sanders lost Maine by roughly the number of votes won by Tulsi Gabbard, who had endorsed him in 2016 but declined to drop out in 2020 and endorse him. She later left the Democratic Party, as we all know, because she's now director of national intelligence, I think, for the Trump administration. Tragic. Anyways, quote, but the backbreaker for Sanders came in Massachusetts, where he had rallied and where he hoped the state's progressive electorate would turn out for him. Before the consolidation, he had led nearly every poll there, with Biden far behind. Now, Biden carried the state 33% to 27%, with Warren finishing third in her home state with 21%. Minnesota went for Biden 39-30 after Klobuchar dropped out. A poll prior to the consolidation had Sanders up by 5 points. Had the party leadership not consolidated behind Biden, of the 14 Super Tuesday states, Sanders would have carried California, Texas, Colorado, Maine, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Utah, and Vermont, as well as a likely win in Oklahoma, leaving Biden just the southern states. But they did consolidate. And Sanders went from expecting to have an insurmountable delegate lead to having an insurmountable deficit, unquote. That, my friend, was the problem. Collusion to manipulate the voter, not a lack of neutrality in and of itself. So that's the first thing I'd like to respond to, that I would respond to a question like that. But moreover, number two, if that was your reaction to that news of David Hogg, being threatened with this ousting from the DNC Board of Officers, yeah, boy, I bet you were disappointed a month later. This comes from the Bezos Post of May 12th. Wrong tab. There we go. Title. DNC panel finds Hogg and another official weren't properly elected to leadership. Apparently like a stop the steal within the DNC election election process or something. Let's see. Let's see what happened here. Quote, a Democratic National Committee panel found that David Hogg and another vice chair were not properly elected this year, setting off a process that could lead to Hogg's ouster amid backlash to his plans to support primary challengers to House Democrats. The Credentials Committee's recommendation will get a vote from the full DNC membership. If approved, the 2 vice chair elections will be invalidated and new elections will be held as soon as practicable. The new elections will be limited to the same 5 candidates who were eligible at the February vote. Can't believe it took them until the 3rd paragraph to actually get to the reason why it was declared invalid. Oh boy. Quote, the challenge to the election was filed more than 2 months ago, before Hogg's announcement about primary challenges, by Kaylin Free, an Oklahoma activist who unsuccessfully sought one of the vice chair slots in the February 1st election. She argued the DNC broke its rules on gender diversity in party officer elections, invalidating the election of Hogg and a second vice chair, Malcolm Kenyatta. I think that's how you pronounce that name. I gotta say, the Bezos Post tagline is definitely a bit inaccurate now, because turns out democracy doesn't only die in darkness. It can also be murdered point blank with fucking diversity quotas, apparently. Huh? And god damn, the insanity of that fact feels as gruesome as, like, using the bloody mess perk for your first time in a Fallout video game. Jesus fucking Christ. I don't think we can move on from this utter insanity without at least attempting to analyze this move on behalf of Kaylin Free. Now, I'll admit, I haven't heard of any of these names before the DNC officer elections, including Hogg's. Now, at least with Hogg, however, I can look him up online, read a story on Wikipedia, and I can feel I know enough to say, at a glance, not a bad pick. Very understandable story, seems like very genuine as to, why he would, start this grassroots campaign that, if you actually read the Wikipedia page, like, he did do some pretty base stuff. He, like, led a whole campaign to boycott Publix over its funding. What was it? I think it was, like, over its funding of either, like, an NRA sponsored candidate or, like, funding of the NRA itself, something along those lines. Like, anyways, like, he's done some base stuff, right? Now, this Kaylin Free person, I mean, credit where credit's due. She did break some barriers as the youngest attorney hired by the DOJ in the 1990s. But she did also become, I should probably pull up her Wikipedia page here. She did also, where did it say? Yeah, right here. 1998, she did also become the first woman and the first Native American to be elected as the DA for a couple of Oklahoma counties. So, like, she's definitely, like, had some accomplishments. But unfortunately, like many of the soulless neoliberals that the Democratic machine has produced since the 1990s, very little can be found about any policy positions of hers, save for, where is it? Prosecuting federal environmental laws, specifically, or I guess, like, especially on tribal lands. Look, don't get me wrong. Like, obviously, I mean, that's more than I've ever done in my life, but compare that to David Hogg's accomplishments as both a politician, grassroots activist who also became the face of a youth movement to stand up to the National Rifle Association and fight for a safer country. Yeah, if you compare those two, it just becomes astoundingly clear who's the more qualified candidate, especially since he was using his few months in the vice chair position to threaten feckless Democratic legislators to either sharpen up their game or lose their fucking job. And I think if Kaylin Free was actually being honest with herself, impossible for most Democratic Party operators, yes, but assuming she had such a rare moment of clarity, I think she would acknowledge that she did not have the record to prove that she could meet this incredibly dire moment, and thus lost the election on that fact alone. But no, instead, she had to whine about sexism, and the DNC, looking for any excuse to get rid of David Hogg, cynically gobbled that shit up, leading to a very disappointing post last night on David's Twitter account. And it wasn't disappointing just because he announced that he wasn't going to try to run for the position again. It was disappointing because it was so goddamn diplomatic and long. Like, so long. So long that I think I'm just going to link it in the sources and you can read his entire thread for yourself, because it's basically, it's just a bunch of word salad. We've been seeing the reporting. We kind of figured this is going to happen. You don't need to do a huge long speech, or if you are going to do a huge long speech, start a Substack or something so you're not having to do this whole fucking thread, dog. Like, it's not fun to have to scroll through that shit. But moreover, like, I really want to emphasize on just how odd it was for him to choose like a diplomatic approach to this, to him getting ousted by the DNC on these bullshit procedural challenges to invalidate his election. Like, dog, the DNC leadership just ousted you in the cheapest, most insane and blatant manner possible. And you're still doing this, oh, we're just disagreeing shtick. Look, it's one thing to be a sore loser when you lost fair and square, like Kaylin, but it's another thing to get stabbed in the gut and then not go down fighting without at least throwing a few punches of your own. I don't think anyone would blame you for telling Ken Martin to go fuck himself, because that billionaire cocksucker kinda deserved it. But all of this and all the other ridiculous displays of incompetency, fecklessness, and pure apathy from sitting Democratic legislators that I mentioned at the start of this segment, it's kind of driven me to a depressing but necessary conclusion. This party, the Democratic Party, while being far better policy-wise on every issue than the fucking fascists, it refuses to carry out the reforms that would solve its current existential crisis, and thus our existential crisis of our lowercase d democracy at large, or what little remains of it, I guess. And with this party in such a crisis, one in which it has generated a deep distrust in the voters who would otherwise embrace the party affirmatively and not in spite of the other corrupt political party, the working class simply cannot depend on the ballot box to rid ourselves of this fascist regime that's taken power. Now, that doesn't mean I haven't given up on democracy in principle. I'll talk more about that in a minute. But I say that because the Bernie Sanders 2020 presidential campaign, in a very odd way, it ignited my hope for a quick and easy way to improve my societal conditions, that finally someone was surging prominently into the realm of American politics who not only managed to speak to me as an apolitical voter at the time, but was also able to clearly and consistently identify what the problems are and what their solutions are. I felt that the most I could do at the time with that spark as a college radio DJ and pop culture commentator was to start a podcast called The Kennel and invite as many corporate PAC donor rejecting candidates as I could to at least identify to my friends and family and local community members what candidates needed to be listened to in a given election. Those who reject the benefit of more campaign funds simply for the principle of remaining solely committed to your working class constituents. But I think that focus needs to shift a bit. Now, that's not to say that I suddenly want to shut myself off from those candidates. I do still plan to do those interviews for as long as I can. I think inherently there is some value in doing that. But I also have to recognize that there are probably better ways to be allocating my energy, time, and focus, right? And here's the thing, really, more of that time, energy, effort, whatever you want to call it, I'm going to be directing it towards a different sort of democratic effort. That desire definitely stems from my undying rage with the incompetent corporate shills running that so-called Democratic Party, but it also stems from an unsettling revelation about the 2024 election in a recent series of reports from Greg Palast, a part-time journalist and full-time data analyst who investigated the effects of some new laws on voting registration challenges that likely had a profound impact on the electoral results. And the nice thing is he compiled all of his work into a recent documentary called Vigilantes, Inc., which actually had some light Hollywood star power attached to it, including Rosario Dawson, Martin Sheen, and Leonardo DiCaprio's father, for what it's worth. And the nice thing, too, is all you really need... Oh, bumped into the microphone there. All you really need to watch it is a stable internet connection and access to YouTube. So, it's just out there for you to watch. And to kind of summarize the findings of this from this documentary, essentially you had a bunch of these GOP-dominated state legislatures since 2020 that have passed these Jim Crow-era laws that allow for voters to get taken off the voter registration lists by someone else just merely filing a challenge to the legitimacy of that registration. The journalist, Greg Palast, he uncovers this decentralized group of MAGA-loving Confederacy worshippers who take advantage of these laws, filing tens, if not hundreds, of thousands of voter registration challenges, forcing all of those challenged voters to use a provisional ballot, which is more unlikely to get counted than a standard ballot. He presents a rather convincing case for his argument, which, given such laws were supported by the political party in power right now, I feel like I'd be wasting your time if I just solely focused my commentary on electoral politics when such a game's fairness, or what little of it was left at least, has already been utterly smashed to bits by our corporate oligarchy's hacks in our government. That's not to say all hope is lost, though. Sean Fain, the president of the United Auto Workers labor union, he proposed somewhat of a backup plan, if you will, recognizing that fundamentally, no matter who was going to win in 2024, the American working class was going to need to build some strong pressure to finally achieve that American dream that all these boomers still yap about. The executive director of the In These Times magazine, his name's Alex Hahn. He coined this plan, Plan 2028. Very creative, I know. I think he was trying to go for like a Project 2025 kind of vibe. But you might know it better as a general strike. Now, for those who don't know, Sean Fain is encouraging other unions to set their next collective bargaining agreements to expire on May Day or May 1st of 2028. Now, I will say, and I'll put a link to an article from In These Times. I think I'll discuss it more next week, but yeah, there might be not a lot of hope for that, right? It takes a little while for the masses to kind of realize, hey, this is what we got to do. We got to ground this economy to a halt, right? But at the same time, when wealth inequality is as bad as it is, and when we have little to no chance of getting our legislators to actually do something for us for once, it's time for us to organize. It's time to halt this unjust economy to a screeching stop come 2028. So, to end my babbling for today, I'm going to let you know right now. My main priority is to discuss the stories that deal with the ongoing struggle for democracy in our workplaces across the country, but especially right here in Middle Tennessee. Analysis of our iconically stupid political environment won't be leaving the unnatural state of affairs anytime soon. Don't worry about that. But if there's one message that I want to be blasting loud and clear over these vintage airwaves, it shouldn't be concerned with an electoral system that, frankly, already failed us long before I hopped in front of a mic. Rather, it should be one that says solidarity with the working class and down with the psycho billionaires that are fucking us over day in and day out. Hey y'all, I'm going to keep it real with you. It's very late at night. My voice is shot after having to do all that barking and yelling, so I'll do my best to keep it short. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Thanks again for stopping by, and yeah, hope to see you again.